So Detective Pikachu is out on DVD here in the UK, and I figured I'd probably gush about it now because I think we can all agree that this film is probably the best video game movie to ever be produced so far. In the past, there have been countless attempts to translate the video game medium into a feature film format, be it with Mortal Kombat, Tomb Raider, or the Super Mario Bros. Movie. But despite all of these years of experience, nothing has quite managed to grasp that truly magical moment of playing video games quite as well as the Detective Pikachu movie has done in 2019. So today I'd like to spend a little moment to break down several of the elements that truly put Detective Pikachu a step ahead from the rest, and perhaps may even be the route that paves the way for all future video game films to be produced. Or so we hope. This is why Detective Pikachu is so good. Take note, game developers. Oh, and do be aware that by November I will have stopped making gaming videos. This is technically a movie video, but if you're a fan of my older content, then check out my pinned Twitter post to see why I'm gonna be reinventing my channel over the next few weeks. Also, I've got an extra message at the end of this video, so do stick around. And with that, thank you, and let's begin. To start things off, the Pokemon series has had a long-running history of video adaptations to run alongside the mainline games. From the classic anime to the modern anime to cartoon feature films and even the cutscenes within the core games these days. But despite all of these newly running stories that the film could have run with, it decided to break away from the narrative norm. For decades we've been following the lives of Ash Ketchum in 2D form or Red and the other 10-year-old Pokemon trainers in video game form, but one of the key starting points that this film capitalized on is diverging massively to what we're used to. Because Detective Pikachu's first great step in the right direction is the fact that it's based off of a spin-off. Entirely separate from the world we're used to, with new rules and designs that allow for the film to expand in new directions to leave us in awe and spread their creatively innovative wings. If this was just another Ash Ketchum story, it'll never live up to the hype of the anime, and furthermore it would be chained down to the same story beats we know. By being based off of the Detective Pikachu game, we can finally see Pokemon as something new again. And even from that, it diverges a good chunk from that core game. The events aren't one-to-one to the game at all, but just the simple rules of a talking Pikachu and a detective story that just takes place in the world of Pokemon allows for a far more investing and successful narrative to be told. But then we come to Detective Pikachu's next majorly important step, live action. Live action is very much becoming the oversaturated new animation genre that's destroying the sanctity of all of our childhood classics, but in order to translate Pokemon into live action, David Letterman, the Pokemon company, and everyone else behind the film put a lot more thought into the production other than just making everything so realistic that it's watered down and boring. And all that comes from the distinct new designs of the Pokemon. Not only was the live action the correct direction for the Pokemon movie to explore in order to create more new experiences out of the same iconic Pokemon, but the intentional choice of what Pokemon were chosen also gave Detective Pikachu a massive advantage in their presentation of the film. Obviously, plenty of Pokemon are there to be seen. Of course Pikachu's there, of course Generation 1 is there taking on the largest role, they are the most iconic one after all, and of course there's all sorts of other generations scattered in too. But with over 800 Pokemon, it's clear that some have to be omitted, and it's entirely intentional which ones are. In order to accurately show off Pokemon in a realistic sense, the film had to target certain Pokemon that are easily translated into a realistic format. There's actually a distinct difference between the core character designs and art styles of modern day Pokemon in comparison to the older generations. Part of the reason Generation 1 is so prominent is because the Pokemon back then were given much more realistic features, proportional bodies and sharper edges and such, as opposed to more modern generations which favoured more cutesier designs with enlarged heads and softer rounded edges. While obviously not entirely clear cut, for the most part, this did have an impact on the film's choice of Pokemon, as a lot of the choices were simply impossible to accurately portray in Detective Pikachu. And so in the film, they never make an appearance. But this decisive effort to choose realistic Pokemon and make them hyper-realistically shown immediately makes each Pokemon their own spectacle that just looks so good, and it helps to keep the audience invested, be them children who get distracted by the dialogue or adults that haven't seen them in this form before, and all keeping us invested by just seeing what so many of them get up to, or how unexpectedly cute they can be presented. Kinda. But moving on from its visual and conceptual design, the actual narrative is a great layout for Detective Pikachu as well, which is oftentimes the biggest crux of previous video game movies. Obviously, we've already spoken about the spin-off element, but the core premise of the film centralizes on two major Pokemon, Pikachu and Mewtwo. Easily two of the most iconic and beloved Pokemon that most people are aware of and can be connected to. The general story of Mewtwo we've seen before, laboratory experiments, escaping and causing chaos, and this film hits on many of those beats as well as divulges in new directions, combining it with Detective Pikachu's detective work and exploring Pikachu's real identity by introducing the ability of combining Pokemon and humans to Mewtwo's arsenal. Something I'm pretty sure they made up for the movie, but suitably fits into both storylines. Not to mention, scattered throughout all of the film are all sorts of references that people can click onto. Pokemon capturing is there, Pokemon battles are now portrayed as an underground ring, lab experiments being a location to find are there too, and the entire city of Rhyme City, based off of just the spin-off game, but effectively works as both a fantasy Pokemon city, but mixed with realistic elements and recognizable architecture, perfectly fitting to bring Pokemon to the real world. Also, do you know which Pokemon are among some of the most popular? Charizard, Machamp, Bulbasaur, Gengar, Ditto. It's all cleverly placed together to make sure that every scene has something recognizable or even beloved to ensure that all fans will enjoy every moment of the film. It has the perfect element of fan service, but still with plenty of room to spare. Maybe next time we'll see the likes of Gardevoir, Umbreon, Lucario, Dragonite, Ninetales, Tyranitar, or just a simple Squirtle, though Blastoise does make a brief appearance. Overall, the narrative perfectly balances the iconic elements that all fans will recognize and love to be reimagined in a new format, whilst divulging enough away from the past so as to give us something entirely new and with some genuinely good writing to boot. The Ryan Reynolds Pikachu comedy works. Now, that being said, there are still some issues to be met with the Detective Pikachu movie. It may be the greatest video game movie so far, but it's not quite a perfect movie. And I've heard a handful of complaints. Some dislike the non-gigantic scale of Pokemon variety, but considering this mostly takes place in one city and you see a lot of Pokemon anyway, I feel it gets by quite nicely. It can spread out the Pokemon species more in the sequel. Others noted that Ryan Reynolds' performance was a little watered down considering his role in Deadpool, to which I say, I get it, in places. There's a lot of coffee references, but at the same time, a lot of his jokes and lines are pretty damn funny. He fits in well to this Pokemon film, and yes, they did try the idea of Danny DeVito first. The other problem that does pop up quite commonly though is the idea that the narrative is quite a chunk predictable, and that I can definitely see. There are a good chunk of twists that you might not expect on this mystery, but the final twist of the film is that Pikachu is Tim Goodman's dad, and you can work that out. And to be fair, it is a kids' film. Many of the complexities come from the themes introduced, like genetic experimentation, fatherly love, themes of regret, or the issues of a state-run news network preventing the telling of making news about corruption. But I can definitely see how some fans were disappointed by the plot, since it was still somewhat adaptations of what we've seen prior. It was the safe option, and that comes with faults. But I feel considering all the benefits that came with it, all things considered, the Detective Pikachu movie did a damn good job, and many of these issues can be quite easily tweaked for the sequel, which was announced before the film even came out. Forgetting the core narrative, even the general structure of the film is methodically placed to keep audiences interested where previous video game films just didn't. The opening is strong and investing, the character introductions aren't heaped with too much exposition, and each scene is succinct and doesn't overstay its welcome. There is good handfuls of exposition here and there, but overall, I'd argue that Detective Pikachu does a good job, certainly above the rest of the competition. Not to mention, many of the new elements introduced in this film are really interesting to see and open up a lot of gateways for the future if they wish to pursue it more. The R gas that makes Pokemon go wild is a great evil tool. The fact that Ditto masquerades as a human makes perfect sense and lines up fantastically with the Mewtwo storyline, considering the theory that Ditto is failed Mew experiments. And the gigantic Torterras is something I would have never thought of myself for a potential Pokemon premise. It's great. So with all of that out of the way, what hopes are there for the sequel? Can it truly live up to the massive stepping stone this original film has created? Well, maybe. I think it's got a lot of potential. Keeping up with the spin-off style of basing the story within the Pokemon world rather than just following the path again is a good direction to continue, whether that is bringing back Tim Goodman and the detective work, or following through with another spin-off concept, which could either be something entirely original or, hey, explore the other spin-off Pokemon games. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is all about talking Pokemon leading their own adventures and can allow for some cutesy animated fun, or delving into the GameCube games. Maybe we can explore into Cypher and their plans to create Shadow Pokemon. Sounds like it would line up nicely with manipulating Pokemon with evil machinery or gases. These could host a whole new cast with a whole new plot premise, or maybe it follows the old crew in a reimagined scenario. Either way, the next movie has a lot going for it. The visual design is fantastic. Introducing more of the scale of Pokemon with new species and their crazy designs would be great. Giving us more of that quirky, witty humor certainly wouldn't go amiss, and showing off plenty of in-game references like battles, catching, or maybe even the side stuff like performances and stadium events as pieces of the film, but not the central point, is a good narrative direction. Dip the world in all sorts of building materials and connections between humans and Pokemon, and you'll manage to strike gold twice with another encapsulating world that fans just can't keep their eyes off of. And that is why Detective Pikachu is just so good. It's not a perfect movie, and it may not keep its title for too long, but as of right now, this is the #1 best video game movie so far. And for the sake of all video game fans out there, I certainly hope that film companies can learn from this and give us endless amounts of true cinematic joy. But that's just a hope from me. For now, my name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. Thank you so much for making it this far into the video. I've only got a 25-second slot to talk here, so this message may get spread over multiple videos, but I'm reinventing my channel. Look at all this rebranding I've done. I've got other plans for the channel, but for now, here's a question. How should I reshape Patreon? What would it take for you to consider joining? What kind of rewards would you expect to see, and how can I improve as a content creator? That's gonna be my message for today. I've got more, but very little time, so do comment your suggestions on this or any of the text, but otherwise, I will see you in a bit. Thank you so much for making it to the end.